We have a habit of thinking about the Bible as a book, a single object, something you can hold in your hands, place on a shelf, carry to church. But for most of its existence, for the majority of the thousands of years that these stories have been alive in the world, the Bible didn't exist as a book at all. It existed as voices, as memory, as stories told around fires, passed from grandparents to grandchildren, repeated so many times across so many generations that the words themselves became sacred long before anyone wrote them down. And understanding that, really sitting with that fact, changes everything about how you approach the text. Because you're not just reading a book, you're hearing an echo of something much older, something that was already ancient by the time the first scribe picked up a reed pen and pressed it to papyrus. Today we're going all the way back, before the scrolls, before the ink, before the writing, to where this all actually began. Let's start with something that might feel unfamiliar to us in the modern world, the idea of an oral tradition. We live in a culture that is absolutely saturated with writing. Text messages, emails, books, articles, captions, subtitles. Written language surrounds us every moment of every day. So, it's genuinely difficult for us to imagine a world where writing either didn't exist or was so rare and specialized that most ordinary people never encountered it. But that was the world for most of human history, and it was absolutely the world of the ancient Near East, the world that produced the biblical stories. In that world, knowledge was preserved and transmitted through memory and speech. Communities developed sophisticated systems for remembering and passing on information accurately across generations. And I want to emphasize the word accurately here, because there's a common modern assumption that oral tradition is basically a game of telephone, that stories get garbled and distorted as they pass from person to person until they barely resemble the original. That assumption is wrong. And it's wrong in an interesting way. Ancient oral cultures, and scholars who study them, have documented this extensively across many different civilizations, developed what we might call memory technologies, deliberate structures built into stories, songs, and recitations specifically to preserve accuracy over time. Think about poetry for a moment. Why does poetry rhyme? At its most basic level, rhyme is a memory tool. If you know the first line ends with night, you know the second line needs to end with a word that sounds like night. The structure itself tells you when something has gone wrong, when something doesn't fit, when a word has been misremembered. Ancient oral traditions worked on the same principle, but with far more sophisticated structures. Repetition, parallel phrasing, fixed formulas, rhythmic patterns, call and response structures. These weren't just aesthetic choices. They were error correction systems built into the fabric of the stories themselves. So, when we talk about the biblical stories existing as oral tradition for centuries before they were written down, we are not talking about a period of unreliable drift and distortion. We are talking about a period of careful, structured, community-maintained preservation. It looked very different from writing, but it was not careless. Now let's talk about the specific world where these oral traditions lived before they became scripture. The stories that would eventually become the Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament, emerged from a collection of ancient Semitic peoples living in a narrow strip of land along the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea, a region the ancient Egyptians called Canaan, a region roughly equivalent to modern-day Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and parts of Jordan and Syria. This was not a quiet, isolated part of the world. It sat at the crossroads of the ancient Near East, between Egypt to the southwest, Mesopotamia to the northeast, and the great trading routes that connected them. Empires rose and fell around these people constantly. The Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, each of them at various points dominating, displacing, or destroying the communities that carried these stories. And this matters enormously for understanding how the oral traditions developed. Because these were not stories told by a settled, comfortable people with the luxury of stable institutions. These were stories told by people who were frequently displaced, enslaved, exiled, and threatened. People for whom the stories themselves, the memory of who they were, where they came from, and what their relationship with their God meant, were sometimes the only thing that couldn't be taken from them.